These are directions for writing a formal lab write-up. I want you to work on this on your own so that during class we can work on our sources of error and writing our conclusion together. So these are directions for your formal lab write-up. So we're going to work on writing the conservation of mass lab into a formal lab. So you definitely need a composition notebook. So the first thing you're going to start with is the very first page of your notebook. You're going to have a table of contents. You want to make sure that you include the title, the date, and the page number. So the title of ours is The Conservation of Mass. The date was on the 27th, I think, and then the page is going to be page number 1. So then what you want to do is understand that every time we write a lab, the left-hand side of your notebook is only for math. So I've drawn a line down the middle here to represent that I've got an open notebook with 2 pages that I'm looking at right there. So I only ever put math on the left-hand side. I never write anything on the left-hand side. I only write anything on the right-hand side. So the right-hand side is all for just writing up the lab, and all of that. So what I want you to do is skip a page here before you start your actual lab. And so then what you're going to do is the rest of the title includes putting the conservation of mass right here in your title, and then you've got your name, your lab partner's name, the date, and the page number. So that, including the table of contents, counts as your 5-point title score. So then what you're going to do is skip a line, and you don't need to write skip a line, just skip a line, and then you're going to write the objectives, and you're going to copy down the objectives that have been given to you on the lab sheet, and you can use your own words to the best of your abilities here. Sometimes there's not really a way to change things around. So all I've done here is copy down the objectives from the lab sheet, so you might need to hit pause and go ahead and copy these down, but that's what that should look like. So writing the objectives down is also 5 points in your lab notebook. So once you've done that, I'm going to move on to the next page, but you don't have to if you have not run out of room. But in this demonstration, I've run out of room, so I'm going to move on to the next page. So then, once you've got your objectives down, you're going to put your background down. So notice I have background section, I've got a nice title there. You're going to summarize the background paragraph in the lab. So you're going to go ahead and hit pause, summarize that background paragraph. Once you've done that, you can play the video again and go ahead and listen to the rest of the things that are included in the background section. So once you've summarized that background section, what you're going to do is also include any math and chemical formulas that you're going to use in the lab. And so I'm going to help you out here and give you the chemical formula. It's also on your lab notebook if you can't see this very well, but your chemical formula right here is you've got vinegar plus sodium bicarbonate, yields sodium acetate, and water and carbon dioxide. And then you're also going to include any math formulas that you're going to use in the lab, even if it's as simple as just subtraction with the final mass minus the initial mass. We always want any math formulas that we're going to use listed in our background section. For this specific lab, our lab value and our actual value are actually going to be just a little bit different. Normally, the lab value is what you get in the lab, and the actual value will be given to you by your teacher, so by Mrs. Hanson or by myself. Once you've got the background section done, you want to include the procedure. So what you want to do is include paraphrase, steps, and materials and safety. So materials in the lab, you're going to list the materials that we used. You're going to list any safety procedures that we talked about that we might need to write down, especially when we start dealing with Bunsen burners and things like that. It's going to be tying our hair back and making sure we don't light our hair on fire. And then with the procedure, you want to paraphrase the steps of the lab in your own words. Please do not just copy. My favorite saying here is you learned how to copy in first grade, and you perfected those copying skills in first grade. You don't need to do it now. So make sure that those procedures are written in your own words. So you're probably going to want to go ahead and pause the video here and write your materials, your safety, and list out your procedures. Sometimes the procedures are going to ask you to draw a diagram as well, but in this case we're not going to ask you to do that. So then once I've written my procedures, I'm just following my lab sheet right here, and I'm going to write down my data table. So the data table is anything, what goes in the data table is anything that you measure. So in this case we measured our initial mass and final mass, and it's really important that you include your units on that. And then the results table is anything that you calculate. So we calculated the change in mass, we calculated the percent error. I'm also just going to include the observations in that. And so also you want to make sure that you include your units in that as well. So with your results table, your results in your data table a lot of times are going to be together, so sometimes we'll split them up and sometimes we won't. But then your results table, any number that shows up in your results table is now something that you've calculated. And so that's where the left-hand side of our paper is going to come from. And so anything that we've calculated is going to include what what shows up in this results table. So you're going to include the title of the equation, you're going to show any math done in the lab, and you're going to list it right over here neatly. So for example here I've set up a bare bones example for you with the mass and then the percent error. You're going to go ahead and fill in your values here. So you're going to hit pause on the video, go ahead and fill in your values, and then if you ever need more room for calculations, you can always turn the page and continue on the next left-hand side. So we always do math on the left and the writing on the right-hand side of the page. So hit pause and make sure that you fill in your data table and fill in your results table, as well as fill in your calculations page so you've got all your work shown for the lab. Once you've done your work, then you're going to look at your post-lab questions. So you've got post-lab questions on this lab. The rules for post-lab questions are as follows. You're either going to rewrite the question and answer it, or you're going to use a complete sentence and answer the question. So please go ahead and pause the video and answer the questions in the post-lab section. Again, remember, you're either going to use a complete sentence and answer the question that way, or you're going to write the question, and then you don't necessarily need to use a complete sentence when you've written the question, because I know what the question is and you're just going to write the answer right below that. So that's up to you, but please really be aware of that. So then what you're going to do is write your conclusion. Leave space for this. What I want you to do is read directions for the conclusion on your lab handout, and this is what we're going to work on in class together. The conclusion is actually one of the hardest parts of a formal lab, so what I want to make sure that we do is work on that together while we're in class. Then what I want you to try to do is your sources of error. So you want to draw the grid from your lab sheet, and if you draw that grid every time, you're probably going to get a good grade on your sources of error. I want you to try to identify sources of error for the lab, and we'll also review those together in class. So when you come to class, here's what I want you to come prepared with, and it's really important that you come ready so that I can help you with your conclusions and sources of error. So you need to have your table of contents and your title filled out. You need to have your objectives copied down. You need to have the background section filled out, including the summary, the math, and the chemical formulas included. You need to have the procedure with the materials and the safety included. You need to have your data and results table included with your values filled in, with your own values from the lab. You need to have your calculations page completed with the math completed, and you need to have your post-lab questions completed. You need to also try to attempt filling out your sources of error, and I will help you with these. They're a little bit more difficult. In class, what I want you to do is work individually with me as I wander the room with feedback on your lab setup and how you're doing, and then we're going to work on writing the conclusion, and we're going to finish the sources of error together. The complete lab is due on Tuesday. Thanks for working on this before you got to class.